I'm Reverend Janet Gollery McKithen, and I'm the minister of the church in Ocean Park, and I welcome you here. You're welcome if you're single, if you're married, if you're divorced, if you're a little child, if you're real big, if you just woke up, if you just got out of prison. We don't care if you're more religious than the Pope or if you haven't been to church or since before the pandemic. We welcome soccer moms, tree huggers, latte sippers, vegetarians, junk food eaters. We welcome you if you're still addicted or if you're in recovery. We welcome you if you like organized religion or if you're repelled by it. We welcome you if you work too hard, you don't work, you can't spell, or you just wanted to get in here in case it starts raining. We especially welcome you if you're standing in the need of prayer this morning. If you've been hurt by a religious community and you're here very cautiously, we welcome you, and we hope that you'll find this to be a healing place. We welcome tourists, seekers, doubters, and you. Welcome to the church in Ocean Park. We are multi-religious, so you're welcome if you're Jewish, if you're Wiccan, if you're Christian, if you're Buddhist, if you're spiritual but not religious, if you're Hindu, if you're Muslim, whatever it is that you are, or something altogether different, you're welcome at the church in Ocean Park. We begin by acknowledging that most of us right now are sitting on stolen land. In Santa Monica, we're sitting on the land of the Quiche and the Chumash and the Tongva peoples. We acknowledge the harms of genocide, forced assimilation, enslavement, and destruction of sacred sites at the hands of U.S. settler colonialism. We also acknowledge that our country and our communities were built on the backs of people who were stolen from Africa, placed into bondage, and forced into labor, a labor that we benefit from that has never been repaid. We acknowledge that we are sitting on all of this and we benefit from all this, and we commit ourselves to healing by helping to create a more just and equitable world through the struggle of changing the way that we do things that we see are normal, but are actually hurting people. We all have biases, and it takes intentionality to build compassion for people whose lives are different from ours. We work together at the church in Ocean Park across boundaries, all kinds of boundaries, to tear down unjust systems and build new relationships of healing and love. This morning you'll hear from a variety of people. If you hear something you disagree with, know that that person does not speak in the entirety for the church in Ocean Park. And your voice, whatever you will feel, is just as important as that person who just spoke. And there will be time of community sharing during this time, and so you will hear from a variety of people who have different opinions. Thank you for being part of this community this morning. Thank you for being a part of bending the arc toward justice. This morning we will have the message will come on the screen. That's why we moved everything over this way. Normally the message is from a live person, but once in a while we show it on the screen. And so we will be doing that this morning, which is different than usual. We center ourselves each week with a chant by Thich Nhat Hanh. I have arrived, I am home, in the here and in the now, 3 times. Take a deep breath. I have arrived. I am home in the here and in the now. I have arrived. I am home in the here and in the now. I have arrived. I am home in the here and in the now. Welcome to the church in Ocean Park. La 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 la
la la la la la la la la la la la la la la la la la la la la la la. Thank you. By the way,
All right, so we're about to have the message on the screen, and the message is it'll be introduced itself, but the reason we're doing this is because we think that this is a very powerful way to say it, and we will have community sharing afterwards, so please watch.
We are angry. We are broken. This should have been a time of joy. Instead, we are mourning. We are fearful. More than 20,000 killed. Thousands are still under the rubble. Close to 9,000 children killed in the most brutal ways. Day after day, 1.9 million displaced, hundreds of thousands of homes destroyed. Gaza, as we know it, no longer exists. This is an annihilation. This is a genocide. The world is watching. Churches are watching. The people of Gaza are sending live images of their own execution. Maybe the world cares, but it goes on. We are asking here, could this be our fate in Bethlehem, in Ramallah, in Jenin? Is this our destiny too? We are tormented by the silence of the world. Leaders of the so-called free lined up one after the other to give the green light for this genocide against a captive population. They gave the cover. Not only did they make sure to pay the bill in advance, they veiled the truth and context, providing the political cover. And yet another layer has been added, the theological cover, with the Western Church stepping into the spotlight. Our dear friends in South Africa taught us the concept of the state theology, defined as theology, the theological justification of the status quo with its racism, capitalism, and totalitarianism. It does so by misusing theological concepts and biblical texts for its own political purposes. Here in Palestine, the Bible is weaponized against us. Our very own sacred text. In our terminology in Palestine, we speak of the empire. Here we confront the theology of empire, a disguise for superiority, supremacy, chosenness, and entitlement. It is sometimes given a nice cover using words like mission and evangelism, fulfillment of prophecy, and spreading freedom and liberty. The theology of the empire becomes a powerful tool to mask oppression under the cloak of divine sanction. It speaks of land without people. It divides people into us and them. It dehumanizes and demonizes the concept of land without people again, even though they knew too well that the land had people, and not just any people, a very special people. Theology of the empire calls for emptying Gaza, just like it called for the ethnic cleansing in 1948, a miracle or a divine miracle as they called it. It calls for us Palestinians now to go to Egypt, maybe Jordan. Why not just the sea? I think of the words of the disciples to Jesus when he was about to enter Samaria. Lord, do you want us to command fire to come down from heaven and consume them? They said of the Samaritans. This is the theology of the empire. This is what they're saying about us today. This war has confirmed to us that the world does not see us as equal. Maybe it's the color of our skins. Maybe it is because we are on the wrong side of a political equation. Even our kingship in Christ did not shield us. So they say, if it takes killing 100 Palestinians to get a single Hamas militant, then so be it. We are not humans in their eyes. But in God's eyes, no one can tell us that. The hypocrisy and racism of the Western world is transparent and appalling. They always take the word of Palestinians with suspicion and qualification. No, we're not treated equally. Yet on the other side, despite a clear record of misinformation, lies, their words are almost always deemed infallible. To our European friends, I never ever want to hear you lecture us on human rights or international law again. And I mean this. We are not white, I guess. It does not apply to us according to your own logic. In this war, the many Christians in the Western world made sure the empire has the theology needed. It is their self-defense, we were told. And I continue to ask, how is the killing of 9,000 children self-defense? How is the displacement of 1.9 million Palestinians self-defense? In the shadow of the empire, they turned the colonizer into the victim and the colonized into the aggressor. Have we forgotten that the state they talked to, that state was built on the ruins of the towns and villages of those very same Gazans? Have they forgot that? We are outraged by the complicity of the church. Let it be clear, friends. Silence is complicity. And empty calls for peace without a ceasefire and end to occupation, and the shallow words of empathy without direct action, all under the banner of complicity. So here is my message. Gaza today has become the moral compass of the world. Gaza was hell before October 7th, and the world was silent. Should we be surprised that there's silence now? If you are not appalled by what is happening in Gaza, if you are not shaken to your core, there is something wrong with your humanity. And if we as Christians are not outraged by the genocide, by the weaponization of the Bible to justify it, there is something wrong with our Christian witness, and we are compromising the credibility of our gospel message. If you fail to call this a genocide, it is on you. It is a sin and a darkness you willingly embrace. Some have not even called for a ceasefire. I'm talking about churches. I feel sorry for you. We will be okay. Despite the immense blow we have endured, we, the Palestinians, will recover. We will rise. We will stand up again from the midst of destruction, as we have always done as Palestinians. Although this is by far maybe the biggest blow we have received in a long time, but we will be okay. But for those who are complicit, I feel sorry for you. Will you ever recover from this? Your charity and your words of shock after the genocide won't make a difference. And I know these words of shocks are coming. And I know people will give generously for charity. But your words won't make a difference. Words of regret won't suffice for you. And let me say it, we will not accept your apology after the genocide. What has been done has been done. I want you to look at the mirror and ask, where was I when Gaza was going through a genocide? to our friends who are here with us. You have left your families and churches to be with us. You embody the term accompaniment, costly solidarity. Think of the words of Jesus. We were in prison and you visited us. What a stark difference from the silence and complicity of others that you are here. Your presence here is the meaning of solidarity. And your visit have already left an impression that will never be taken from us. Through you, God has spoken to us that we are not forsaken. As Father Rami of the Catholic Church said this morning, you have come to Bethlehem and like the Magi, you brought gifts with you, but gifts that are more precious than gold, frankincense, and myrrh. You brought the gift of love and solidarity. We feel it. We needed this. For this season, maybe more than anything, we were troubled by the silence of God. In these last 2 months, the Psalms of Lament have become a precious companion to us. We cried out, my God, why have you forsaken Gaza? Why do you hide your face from Gaza? In our pain, anguish, and lament, we have searched for God and found him under the rubble in Gaza. Jesus himself became the victim of the very same violence of the empire when he was in our land. He was tortured, crucified. He bled out as others watched. He was killed and cried out in pain, my God, where are you? In Gaza today, God is under the rubble. And in this Christmas season, as we search for Jesus, he is not to be found in the side of Rome, but our side of the wall. He is in a cave with a simple family, an occupied family. He's vulnerable, barely and miraculously surviving a massacre himself. He's among the refugees, among a refugee family. This is where Jesus is to be found today. If Jesus were to be born today, he would be born under the rubble in Gaza. When we glorify pride and richness, Jesus is under the rubble. When we rely on power, might, and weapons, Jesus is under the rubble. When we justify, rationalize, and theologize the bombing of children, Jesus is under the rubble. Jesus is under the rubble. This is his manger. He is at home with the marginalized, the suffering, the oppressed, and the displaced. This is his manger. And I have been looking and contemplating on this iconic image. God with us precisely in this way. This is the incarnation. Messy, bloody, poverty. This is the incarnation. And this child is our hope and inspiration. We look and see him in every child killed and pulled from under the rubble. While the world continues to reject the children of Gaza, Jesus says, just as you did to one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did it to me. You did it to me. Jesus not only calls them his own, he is them. He is the children of Gaza. We look at the Holy Family and see them in every family displaced and wandering, now homeless in despair. While the world discusses the fate of the people of Gaza as if they are unwanted boxes in a garage, God in the Christmas narrative shares their fate. He walks with them and calls them his own. So this manger is about resilience. It's about sumud. And the resilience of Jesus is in his meekness, is in his weakness, is in his vulnerability. The majesty of the incarnation lies in its solidarity with the marginalized. Resilience because this is the very same child who rose up from the midst of pain, destruction, darkness, and death to challenge empires, to speak truth to power, and deliver an everlasting victory over death and darkness. This very same child accomplished this. This is Christmas today in Palestine, and this is the Christmas message. Christmas is not about Santas. It's not about trees and gifts and lights. My goodness, how we have twisted the meaning of Christmas, how we have commercialized Christmas. I was, by the way, in the USA last month, the first Monday after Thanksgiving, and I was amazed by the amount of Christmas decorations and lights and all the commercial goods. And I couldn't help but think, they send us bombs while celebrating Christmas in their lands. They sing about the Prince of Peace in their land while playing the drum of war in our land. Christmas in Bethlehem, the birthplace of Jesus, is this manger. This is our message to the world today. It is a gospel message. It is a true and authentic Christmas message about the God who did not stay silent, but said his word, and his word was Jesus. Born among the occupied and marginalized, he is in solidarity with us in our pain and brokenness. This message is our message to the world today, and it is simply this: this genocide must stop now. Why don't we repeat it? Stop this genocide now. Can you say it with me? Stop this genocide. Let's say it one more time. Stop this genocide. This is our call. This is our plea. This is our prayer. Hear, O God. Amen.
La da 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 da, la da 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 da, la da 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 da.
Interfaith Council in Santa Monica, and we wrote a statement that wasn't as strong as I would have liked, but there are a mixture of folks there. We haven't yet finished our statement from the church in Ocean Park. I just want to tell you where we're at. We had a leadership retreat, and this is one of the responses of the leadership retreat, that we would show this and talk about it. But another one was that we would make a statement, which we're working on, and the next steps are to talk about the word genocide and apartheid with other folks and bring them in. It's more challenging to, and doesn't feel as good to wait. But that's where we are. The process is also just important, but so, yeah, we haven't done enough. We do have a group that's working on what's the best way to take action. But we haven't done enough. But this is a time for anybody to express their concerns or to ask a question. I didn't know this would happen, guys. I've seen that before. It's not the first time.
Some have proposed that this is not religious or spiritual or based on faith, but what is going on in that region is ethnic and racial. And I'm wondering specifically, has the pastor that we just heard from expressed any of that sentiment? Because obviously he is a Christian, and they who are affected are Muslim. There's that difference, but at the same time, he's still suffering.
Right.
So I'm wondering specifically, is that theory being, promoted, if indeed it's known?
A theory? Say that again.
About it being more ethnic and racial as opposed to spiritual and religious, or I don't even want to say religious, but dogmatic, because we're talking about an interpretation of what is in, quote unquote, the Torah, the Bible,
Right. I think he's
and
saying
the Injil.
I think he was saying it's both. Like it's well, so he did mention that if we were a different color, would it be different? Which I think it would have. But also he's saying like he's a deeply spiritual Christian person, and he's talking to a Christian congregation, and so that's his stance, and that's the lens he's looking out of, and the lens that they're seeing him in is his position as a priest or a minister. And so he talks to them because a lot of people are not talking about how the theology plays into it. So he's talking from his perspective as a Christian, how the Christian theology plays into it, and has played into most of the genocides that have happened in the world. So I thought he did an amazing job of doing kind of both, because it was very articulate, and he talked about how we use our theology many times as Christians, and he was speaking, because he is a Christian, he's speaking out of that lens. We have used our theology and abused our theology, and then just like twisted it and made it not actually what it is. And that's what I think he was talking to.
I don't know if I'm going to start crying either, because this is the second time I've seen this. And
Yeah.
Anyway, just heads up. I want to say, in specific response to what Craig said, I think that any serious discussion of religion needs to make it clear that Judaism and Zionism are not the same.
Right.
And I think that I will not belabor that point, but I could go on, but I won't. And I think if other people want to talk about that, I think that would be useful. I want to talk about my own experience as someone who came out of a Methodist tradition of don't get involved in politics and go to church and seek a spiritual experience and I don't know, buying shares in the afterlife. I don't know. I mean, I realize that that's a song from a pretty irreverent Irish Catholic group that got condemned by the Pope. But anyway, but I think that was my spirituality. Until the war in Vietnam, until the government that I paid taxes to, or my parents paid taxes to, began to impose a genocide on the people of Vietnam. And the reason I can't maintain my composure at this point, which I don't think that's actually a problem, but just evidence, is because in the mid-60s, I became really convinced by the argument, by the vision, by the theology that Reverend Isaacs talks about in the end, that Christ is in the rubble. That the incarnation means that God loved the world enough that he sent his own kid, his only son, into the most oppressive situations. And it is, and if you love me, feed my sheep. If you love me, feed my lambs. That's in James. And I'm sorry, I'm just going on and on.
Daria?
Aside from that sermon validating every single second of why I study theology, I am reminded of, in one of my classes, or many of them rather, we learn that many of the books in the New Testament are addressed from a Palestinian rabbi to exiles. And there are some scholars who argue, and I agree with them, that Christianity is a religion for the exiles, which certainly echoes what this priest is wanting to share, that Christ is in the rubble. Exiles are those, as you may know, who are forced from their land that they consider home due to occupation, due to other circumstances, such as genocide, such as apartheid, and those are two modern-day terms that obviously a first-century ancient Palestinian would not know. However, I just think it's important, as I listen to this, as I am paying attention to what is going on, that I remember that the subject that I'm studying, that is often told to me every single day how irrelevant it is, that actually the lessons we learn from theology such as this is that we are here to liberate. We are here to, like Linda said, be the sheep, be the ones who are lifting our brothers and sisters out of the rubble, making systems more just, more compassionate, because if we call ourselves Christian, we believe in a God who loves, a God who is merciful. And yes, Jesus was Jewish, by the way.
Let me just say before I go to Gail, is that even though this was a, thank you, Daria, it was a Christian, a sermon and all that, I think it's important for all of us, Christian or non-Christian, to hear this kind of a sermon, because when people take faith and religion out of the context of working for civil rights, working for human rights, it doesn't make sense. Religion and faith have to be a part of it, because it is a part of it. It's a big part of what's driving a lot of what's happening, and so and the misuse of it. And I think that so for people who are non-Christian, I think it's still important to hear what Christian, because I recognize everybody's not Christian. We're interfaith.
Yeah. I just want to validate what Linda said. I was raised what I call milquetoast, Presbyterian, and it was an empty experience. And I tried to have it be feeling a connection. And it's not until I heard this version, or what I heard real Christianity, that I could say I am a Christian. This is the only reason I can say that, because everything else that I was raised with simply had no meaning. It didn't speak to my experience or my heart or my head. And it was when I came to this church that was like, oh, I learned what I believe now is true Christianity. And I'm so moved by this. And to me, that I can only see this struggle through the eyes of real Christianity, frankly.
Bob?
There's so many different dimensions of this. First, I can't remember exactly the distinction you made, Craig, but I do remember part of my response to it was there's something, it's not just this and it's not just this, but the minister is also talking about matters of power.
Bob?
Of power. He's talking about empire. And that has to do a lot with political power and economic power. And those are, you know, a huge forces in this whole picture. But moving on from that, you know, a phrase that is part of our self-definition as a church that I especially latched onto this morning, Janet, when you said it, was that we are committed to tearing down systems of oppression. Now, in the part of the world we're talking about, it seems to me that mainly those who are oppressed are the Palestinians, and mainly the oppressors are not only the Israeli state, but
All of us.
the United States and the government and so forth. Okay, so I mean, clearly, I think we all agree we want to be supporting ceasefire. I won't go into whether to use genocide and apartheid too much right now, but one thing that comes up, I mean, it's clear that we want to oppose overwhelming use of violence by, you know, the Israeli state toward the Palestinian people. But there is another question that comes up. If we are in favor of tearing down systems of oppression, by what means for doing that do we support? And I'm not sure there's a unanimous answer within this hall or among very sincere people who desire real justice. Because some feel that, so the question is, what actions on the part of the oppressed or on behalf of the oppressed does one support or not support? And that comes up around the attack, the initial
Hamas, yeah.
October 7th attack. And there are, I mean, you do have to put that in a historical context, for sure. But there are some left people, some people who are for equality, support guerrilla warfare, they support certain kinds of violence on the part of those who are fighting the oppression. And some are against that. Some think that the only way to the kind of world we want has to come through nonviolence.
And there's some who believe that it's sometimes necessary, like there's in-between people too.
Yeah, right. It doesn't have to be, it's always this way or it's always that way. But you know, I know that's something Dr. Kim was expressing that she was struggling with. And I continue to struggle with that one. But it's a somewhat different question than whether it's okay for the empire to, to reign as it has been.
Okay, can you go back to, and then to Luis?
Yes. I don't see Christ in the rubble alone. I think God is in the rubble. God's Spirit is in the rubble. The way I came to acknowledge, to understand the Bible, and the way I became a Christian really was when I went to a library. I think I was about 11 years of age, and I went to the library to borrow a book. And I was looking around in the library. I saw a book on the Old Testament, and I took it up and I started to read it. And I was intrigued by all the wars and the struggle for position and all of that, and all those wars and killings and so on in the Bible. That is what attracted me to begin to understand this. I know it's true. I've told people that already, even at home. And it is in that war, it is in those wars and so on, I say, oh, I never thought all of that was in the Bible. And it is in those struggles that I really came to see, like God is in there too. God's Spirit is in there. So Christ in the rubble is just maybe a more simple, I wouldn't say simple, but a more extended expression of that, and that's how I see it. So, I think I believe in nonviolence and so on. It has its place, but I also tend to think that we should be in the fighting ourselves.
In the mix, yeah.
Too, in the mix ourselves too, at times,
Yeah, just responding to Craig Ali, I don't know if I heard you right, but it sounded like you're saying, is there a racial component to this genocide and this killing? It seems that in white supremacy, I mean, just the example of, like, why were the Japanese Americans so easily put in camps and not the German Americans? I mean, it's like that's the other. It's easier to kill and, suppress them because, we're white, they're different and less than. That's where white supremacy is.
Right. And also, Linda was talking about Vietnam, and when I was a refugee coordinator for the conference, I worked with Southeast Asians that were being resettled in the United States, and and the results of all of this is on, and part of war happens to be raping the women, and the kids that come out of that sometimes, depending on the culture, may have great difficulties. I want to know if there's anybody online that's trying to talk. No, okay. All right, and yeah, oh, two more over here.
So yesterday, President Biden was here with his wife, Jill Biden, going to a thing in Bel Air. And as I was driving to my parents' house from my in my apartment in Westwood, the one side of the 405 was closed due to the Biden sort of thing. And as I was driving home on the 10 freeway, there were a bunch of Palestinians, protesters, hanging out on their, side of the car. And, because I think they were thinking that Biden was flying out or into the San Monica airport, but I was sort of hearing them saying, stop genocide, side.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing this first. And the other thing I was thinking is your concern about not taking action quickly enough. I think I would sort of say that the conversation is important. And I realize we're talking about action, but I think, going back even to the Vietnam War, which is sort of in my consciousness, I have been amazed at our lack of understanding of the failure of those kind of empire policies. And they have returned in all of the things in the Middle East, and the sort of disproportionate reaction to bad events. And this is, I think, one of them. That clearly the Hamas attack was tragic, and all of it, we can go through all of that, but the reaction to it, and maybe it's empire, maybe it's power, is this sort of disproportionate reaction to things that inevitably doesn't work out, as history would show. And so the conversation about how to deal with that is also important.
Yeah,
and so, I don't know, that I think, and I also realize it is, from a personal perspective, has made me more focused on the difference between a religion or that sort of train of thought and one that is about a culture or an empire, and that whether it's Judaism or Islam or Christianity or whatever, both of those strains are there, and there's some really negative ones about using, as he said, the text to support the oppression and genocide. So thank you.
Right, thank you. Oh, Marty hasn't spoken. Hey.
Thank you. I think I may
Put it like this. Yeah.
may upset a few of you people here because I've been very much disturbed by this whole war, as most of you have. But what's been really irking me is the emphasis, as you were saying here, the emphasis on Israel, the Holy Land, the Jews, and while we've been demonstrating, the whole world is demonstrating against Gaza, which I agree they should be. In the meantime, the emphasis is on this, while in the meantime, Russia, who was going to the UN and saying, oh, look Israel, look what these dirty Jews are doing, the dirty Jews. 500,000 people are dead in the Ukraine. There's so many people who have been raped. There's emphasis on them lining people up and shooting them with their hands tied, children being taken away to Russia, and there's no marches. What's going on now? Why, if there's a 500,000 Ukrainians dead, 500,000 Russians are dead, and they're saying, well, you know, there's 20,000 dead in Gaza. That's terrible, but why are there not marches against Russia? In the meantime, you were talking about the racial thing. Africa is just being destroyed. The Sudan and the Congo, there are 1 million people in each one of these countries dead. But I guess nobody cares about black people in Africa. There's no demonstrations against the Congo and the Sudan. What's going on here? Why is this thing about the Holy Land? The Christians are so upset. It's the Holy Land, Jesus, Jesus. Jesus was persecuted by the Romans. People forget there's a big historical thing going on that people have forgotten about. As I had mentioned once before, Rome came in 100 years before Jesus and destroyed Israel, killed all of their leaders, hunted down the Maccabees, the leaders of the Jews. By the time of Jesus, these are just puppet people we're talking about in the New Testament. These Jews were not the leaders, real leaders. The real leaders were dead. After the death of Jesus, there were 3 major wars. A slaughter went on in Israel. The first war, as we know, was the destruction of Jerusalem, but people forgot there were 2 wars afterward that were even worse. The third war with Rome, the Jews were kicked out. They were either murdered, enslaved, or they ran. And that was the end of the Jews. They were not allowed to come back to their homeland. My parents and other people I know who are in Europe told me that when they went to school, they were whipped by the Christian teachers and told, you didn't go back to Palestine. Palestine was a word that was used originally by the Jews who had immigrated to Palestine, not by the Palestinians. This was something that had been brought up later on. In 1919, the League of Nations came out and said we should have a Jewish state here in Israel. But more history, it was the British and the French who didn't want to give up their colonies. The leader of the Palestinian leader at the time, Hineni, he was made the governor of Israel by the colonists, by the British, went to Hitler and said, please don't send these people to the Holy Land. Don't send them here. We don't want them here. Subsequently, Hitler murdered all these Jews. Hitler didn't want to do this. Hitler wanted to send them to the Holy Land, to Israel. He didn't want to kill them. But no, the British and the Palestinian Muslims didn't want them there. Anyway, now we have this horrible thing going on. Even next door, one last thing, next door, Syria, they've been bombing and gassing their own people there. 150,000 are dead. 1 million people are been displaced. No demonstrations against Syria. A few people have asked me, well, the problem is that we're funding this Holocaust that's going on there now. And I said, well, I agree, but these demonstrations are going on all around the world, especially in Europe, and they're not funding this war. So I believe part of this is a racial, anti-Jewish thing going on here. Christians still hate the Jews for killing Jesus, even though Jesus was Jewish. And he was really murdered by the Romans.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have a few historians here. You had your hand up before. Do you still?
Yeah. As a historian, I'm not going to comment about except for the omission of the Balfour Declaration, which I think is an important part of the narrative. But anyway, and to reiterate my main point, which in answer to Craig, which is that Judaism is not the same as Zionism, and that we should, my recommendation is that we invite a speaker from Jewish Voice for Peace to speak to the congregation. I mean, it's concrete.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think we have a couple of different, I mean, obviously we could go on and on with this. We're going to wrap it up, but I want to say that I think that's we do need that conversation, or I think it would be also, might be a little dicey, but a conversation about Hamas and what happened on October 7th. You know, because of what Bob said about the violence and what happens when you're radicalized and what happens when you don't have other choices, or things like that. So I think that there's so many layers, as you can see, to this whole situation, and that's one of the reasons why. But we don't want it to immobilize us, just because it's layered. Everything in life is layered. If we did allow that, we would just be standing right here. We wouldn't have got out of bed today. So our whole life is layered like that. So you know, and you have to stand out boldly, even if you made the wrong decision. That's how I live my life, basically. So anyhow, we're going to take a moment of silence, and then we're going to have a song. But we know that this is, you know, we'll keep, you know, talking about it, but we'll talk about other things too, because as Marty said, this is not the only thing in the world. It's an important thing that we need to respond to, but it's not. But there are other things in our bailiwick as well. So let's take a deep breath and have a moment of silence. Thank you all for sharing.
Listen, listen to my heart song. I will never forget you. I will never forsake you.
I will
Never forget you. I will never forsake you.
All right. Are there joys or concerns or anniversaries or birthdays?
I'd like to
Here you go.
a joy for my sisters who are traveling to Belize. They had originally planned a trip to Israel and the Middle East on October 7th. Of course, it did not happen, so this is their replacement.
Great, thank you.
I applied to join the Theological Studies Honor Society because of my GPA.
Whoa! Wow! Yes.
Joy and concern. Joy and concern. The joy is we have another African American History Month. The concern is they take the shortest month to talk about the longest history.
That's true.
That's right.
Oh, sure.
Oh, yeah, leap year.
I have a birthday. Carmen and Chloe's mom, Vanessa, has her birthday on Saturday coming up, so I think it'd be nice to sing happy birthday to Vanessa. And a deep, deep joy that my comrade Hamza in Gaza is still alive.
Great. I'm going back to you because I missed you guys.
I want to tip an actor on Clearwater something. He was in the Rocky movies with Sylvester Stallone, who died. Carl Weathers, who died this past week. Who was in the Rocky movies with Sylvester Stallone.
Yeah.
I just want to lift up Claudia and her family, and a little bit her brother, who doesn't. He may be well-meaning, but he's a little self-centered and doesn't quite get it, and it's a little bit of a challenge.
And we lift you up.
And I don't expect him to change. And that's a lesson we're all learning.
Yeah.
Feels a little weird, but it is my birthday on Wednesday. So.
That's not weird. We want to know.
That's so weird, Craig.
I want to lift up Chuck Howell, our dear friend who's very, very seriously ill. and is still in the hospital. I guess that's all I can say for now.
Can I say one thing about that? I was heard yesterday that they're going to try to move him to an acute rehab facility this week. And I don't know if that will happen, but that's what I was told yesterday.
Okay, well, we have these very serious concerns and joys. We lift them up on our hearts, and those, I know there's plenty more that weren't said, so we lift those up as well. And Joanne, we lift up Joanne as well. We lift up Joanne. It's been a long, long road for her right now. And we are going to sing happy birthday to Chris and Vanessa.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Chris. Happy birthday, dear Vanessa. Happy birthday to you. We are a gentle, loving people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a gentle, loving people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We're also angry, so we are a gentle, angry people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a gentle, angry people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We're a land of many colors. We are a land of many colors, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a land of many colors, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a gentle, loving people, singing, singing for our lives. We are a gentle, loving people, and we are singing, singing for our lives.
We say together, mute everybody on Zoom. We say together, carry on. 1, 2, 3.
Carry on.